Hey guys, welcome back, and welcome to part 2 of our next presidential series installment, looking at the 25th President of the United States, William McKinley. TJ here with Dead History, of course. I am flying solo. Henry's not with me this week for this installment, so we're going to jump right in. Now listen, as we all know, anybody that watches these videos on a weekly basis, and I think there are several of you that do so, part 1 is always the childhood, birthplace, growing up, that sort of thing of the president. And then part 2 is always the presidency. So we have a decent amount to cover here in part 2. We have not only McKinley's presidency, which you have to understand, includes a war. So there's definitely some things to go over there. Then, of course, we have an assassination. So we definitely will be reading excerpts from the President is Dead book and that sort of thing. So we will definitely be diving into the assassination a bit here, too. I don't believe, I did do an assassination video for both John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln, like a very specific special assassination video on the date of their assassination. I don't believe I'm going to do that with McKinley and James Garfield, only because I'm covering their assassinations in their actual presidential series videos, and there's just not as much to get into as there is with Kennedy and Lincoln's assassination. So, but we will be covering the assassination of McKinley today, of course. So here we go. Let's dive right in. So I'm going to kind of give you an overview at first of McKinley's presidency, just kind of a brief little narrative, and then I will get into more specifics after that. In 1896, the Republicans needed a popular candidate to beat the Democrats. Though, frankly, if they had nominated a statue of George Washington, the Democrats would have come in second. The Republicans' choice was William McKinley. He'd been a congressman from Ohio, and later on he had been a governor twice. He had a clean reputation. McKinley was affable, political, charming, suave. He was likable, but he was also quite intelligent. McKinley's opponent in 1896 was William Jennings Bryan, a fiery liberal Democrat. William Jennings Bryan was known as a tremendous orator. Wherever he went, a crowd would come out just to hear him speak, no matter what the words might be. While William Jennings Bryan traveled over 18,000 miles by train searching for votes, William McKinley spent his money on posters, pamphlets, and signs, and he campaigned from the front porch of his Canton, Ohio home. A president today could not get away with the front porch campaign that William McKinley ran in 1896. People would say, who does he think he is? He doesn't have to get out and work for the job? But that is what McKinley did. He did indeed primarily campaign from his front porch of his Canton, Ohio home during this 1896 election and campaign. More than 13.5 million voters turned out on Election Day, nearly 80% of the electorate. And though it was close, McKinley's strategy worked, and he pulled out the victory with just over half of the popular vote. The newest president would lead the nation into the 20th century, prosperity, and its first war with a foreign country in 50 years. Now we kind of look a little bit ahead to 1897. The national spotlight was on the newly minted 25th president, William McKinley. His inauguration became the first to be recorded by a movie camera. And he soon proved to be a master of media, strolling through Washington, posing for photographs with the public. There were now more than 13,000 newspapers, more than triple the number since the Civil War. And the savvy 54-year-old president was the first to understand the value in cultivating good relationships with the press. You see much more active press management from the executive branch, and people like McKinley who understand that if you use the press correctly, you can project your views much more skillfully. McKinley was a very loved man. He knew how to handle the press. He knew, in fact, something about the hidden hand of the presidency. That if you want a president to have power, you have to not make it look as if the president is the one pulling the strings. But the drums of war were about to spoil McKinley's welcome party. In 1898, Spain's global empire was dwindling, but they still maintained a colony in Cuba, right at America's doorstep. And now, Cuban rebels were trying to overthrow Spanish rule once and for all. Many Americans wanted to set the people of Cuba free, maybe set them free to become colonists in a new American empire. William McKinley was the last of the presidents who had served during the Civil War, and McKinley himself said, "I have seen bodies piled like cordwood." And McKinley was not about to launch on a war unless it was absolutely necessary. But McKinley eventually bowed to unyielding pressure from hawks in Congress and warmongering media mogul William Hearst, and McKinley sent a battleship to Havana Harbor, the USS Maine. Certainly sending a battleship into someone else's harbor at a time when there is an incipient Cuban revolution going on, and had been for quite some time, is a provocative move. McKinley had rather ambitious war plans ready to go. 160 active U.S. naval ships were on alert all over the globe. In the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and in the Philippines. When the USS Maine exploded under mysterious circumstances, killing 250 Americans. It was attributed to Spanish perfidy, and the advocates of war said, "We must avenge the deaths of American sailors aboard the Maine." The media turned into a double-edged sword for McKinley, pushing public opinion toward war. Journalism was different it was a different beast back then. The journalists of that era were aggressive. A press that more and more thinks it has a role to play in politics, and investigative reporting is really taking off. The headlines, "Remember the Maine," and "To hell with Spain," blared from Hearst-owned newspapers across the country. McKinley, still haunted by his memories of the Civil War, hesitated to make the final declaration. He largely left the decision in the hands of Congress when it was clear that they would go to war no matter what he wanted. And on April 25th of 1898, Congress declared war on Spain, and McKinley signed it. As one particular colonel, Theodore Roosevelt, led his squad of Rough Riders into battle on Cuba's San Juan Hill, McKinley brought the White House into the 20th century. McKinley creates the Situation Room. The Situation Room is important because it has this new instrument, the telegraph, which allows McKinley to get real-time updates of what's taking place on the battlefield. The Spanish-American War lasted 10 weeks, with fighting taking place in the Caribbean and the Pacific. The U.S. would emerge victorious and take on a new role, colonial power. The United States did, at the end of the war, annex the Philippines and Puerto Rico, and McKinley was criticized by those people who contended that the United States should not become an empire. But the Philippines, McKinley said, cannot govern themselves. And if the United States had not stayed, the Germans might have taken the Philippines. The Japanese might have taken the Philippines. The Spanish-American War is important because America emerges from the war as a global power. And in doing so, it enhances the power of the president as commander-in-chief. McKinley added to America's global expansion with the annexation of Hawaii in 1898, and his popularity soared. In 1900, with his new running mate, Theodore Roosevelt, McKinley won an easy rematch against William Jennings Bryan. But less than a year into his second term, while visiting the Pan American Expo in Buffalo, New York, his fondness for pressing the flesh proved fatal. And we will get into that about, obviously, his assassination coming up here in a little while. So there you have it. We're in a war, the Spanish-American War. This is obviously the first time that our country is in war in 50 years with a different country. You know, obviously we had the Civil War, but that was us fighting amongst each other, ourselves. So this is the first one in 50 years where we're fighting a foreign nation. The Spanish-American War. We did win. There's definitely an overtone of imperialism going on with the McKinley administration and the McKinley presidency. We're going to get into imperialism a bit here in a little bit. But so that's kind of an overview. Now we're going to get into some specifics as far as the McKinley presidency goes. Okay, so just to read you some more regarding McKinley and the Spanish-American War. As president, he booted Spain out of 4 territories. Even though McKinley's then Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Theodore Roosevelt, allegedly claimed that his boss possessed no more backbone than a chocolate eclair, while the situation with Spain was deteriorating, McKinley and Spain would eventually cut off diplomatic relations, and the United States supported Cuba in its struggle with the Spanish. After the American battleship Maine exploded and sank under mysterious circumstances off the coast of Havana in February of 1898, killing 266 sailors, McKinley demanded Spain grant independence to Cuba, and Congress authorized a declaration of war on April 25th of 1898, though they retroactively dated it to April 21st. In the roughly 100-day Spanish-American War, the United States destroyed the Spanish fleet outside of Cuba's Santiago, seized Manila in the Philippines, and annexed Puerto Rico and Guam, ending Spain's run of colonial dominance. Interesting stuff, of course. As I touched on in part 1, William McKinley's home life was very, very tragic. He married Ida Saxton, a cashier at her father's bank, in 1871. She gave birth to a daughter, Catherine, on Christmas Day in the same year. A second daughter, Ida, was born in 1873, but she died 4 months later. And then Catherine passed away from typhoid fever in 1875. And Ida Saxton, McKinley's wife's health deteriorated due to phlebitis, and undiagnosed epilepsy. During their time in the White House, Ida Saxton often needed sedation to enable her to sit through official functions as First Lady, and McKinley would throw a handkerchief over her face when she suffered an epileptic seizure. Interesting stuff, very sad, unfortunate stuff, of course, when it came to McKinley and his children and his wife. We touched on that a bit in part 1. I did just touch on this a little bit ago, the fact that William McKinley, he did annex the Republic of Hawaii. McKinley reversed the policy of his predecessor, Grover Cleveland, and advocated for Hawaii to become a U.S. territory. After the Spanish-American War, the strategic importance of the island's location in the Pacific Ocean became more apparent, and an annexation resolution supported by McKinley passed the House and Senate in 1898. The episode marked an end to a lengthy battle between the native Hawaiians and white American businessmen for control of the local government. The last monarch of Hawaii, Queen Liliuokalani, I had it pronounced right in the other video. Queen Liliuokalani, I believe it is, Okalani, was overthrown in 1893, and Benjamin Harrison actually sent a bill to the Senate to approve the annexation. But Grover Cleveland became president before it was passed, and he withdrew the bill. When McKinley became president, he tried to reintroduce the bill, but was stymied by the Hawaiian Patriotic League, who kept the U.S. at bay until the events of 1898. Pretty interesting stuff. I thought. Pretty interesting. So let me think. What else here can I tell you about McKinley? So we went over the Spanish-American War. Went over that sort of thing. Let me see some fun facts for you here. William McKinley had a pet double yellow-headed Amazon parrot that he named the Washington Post. I found this to be pretty funny. Yeah, he had a parrot. It was named Washington Post, and apparently the parrot could whistle the tune of Yankee Doodle. So, parrot named Washington Post, he could whistle Yankee Doodle. I thought that was pretty funny. Another thing, just to follow up with the Spanish-American War. Following the Spanish-American War, William McKinley's administration began negotiations for a canal through the Isthmus of Panama. Pretty interesting stuff there. I thought that was pretty cool. What else here? That's about the assassination, which we're going to get into. Okay, here we go. This is pretty cool. As I touched on, William McKinley's inauguration was the very first on film. McKinley's inauguration was the first presidential inauguration to be filmed. Now, I'm going to show you the clips. I think it's about a minute or so long of some of the inauguration film of William McKinley. Keep in mind, there's no sound. There was film, but it was silent. It was silent film. There was no sound attached to the filming back then. So, this is the very first time an inauguration was ever, captured on video film. And this is the inauguration of William McKinley. So, take a look here. Pretty cool stuff. The very first presidential inauguration ever caught on film, and that, of course, was of William McKinley. I thought that was really cool. Couple other really cool things, facts about McKinley. William McKinley was the first in an automobile. McKinley was the first president to ride in an automobile while in office. After he was actually shot, he was transported to the hospital in an electric ambulance. So, pretty interesting. Very first to ever ride in an automobile was William McKinley. Of course, telephone campaign. McKinley was the first president to use a telephone to campaign. As I had spoke about, he did the front porch campaigning during his campaigning, during his first bid for president back in 1896. So I thought that was really cool that he also used the telephone to help campaign, which pretty interesting stuff there. Presidential war buddies. During the Civil War, William McKinley's commanding officer was Rutherford B. Hayes, who also became president of the United States. I had touched on in part one when I spoke about McKinley in the Civil War that Rutherford B. Hayes was a good friend of McKinley's. They had met when McKinley was under Rutherford B. Hayes in the Civil War. So pretty cool. Not in my house. William McKinley's wife, Ida, she disliked the color yellow so much that she had all things yellow removed from the White House, including the yellow flowers in the garden. So Ida McKinley was definitely not a fan of the color yellow. She could not stand it. I thought that was pretty funny. I kind of laughed at that. You hear these stories of presidents and first ladies and such, and the extremes they go to with some of this stuff, like in the White House, she didn't like yellow, everything, even the flowers removed. It's pretty funny. A smooth face. William McKinley was the only president between Andrew Johnson and Woodrow Wilson to be clean-shaven. So yes, we had a long string of presidential beards, presidential mustaches, and, facial hair of some sort. And William McKinley was the only president between Andrew Johnson and Woodrow Wilson that actually was smooth-faced, clean-shaven. Pretty cool there. The $500 man, yes, William McKinley. William McKinley's portrait was featured on the $500 bill. The last time that the $500 bill was printed was in 1934. You're probably seeing here on your screen now, of course, images of the $500 bill and William McKinley being on it. So if any of you out there are old currency collectors, pretty cool stuff. Maybe you have a William McKinley $500 bill laying around. That's pretty cool. Here's kind of a cool thing, a strange twist of fate. William McKinley loved carnations, and he wore them as a good luck charm. While attending the Pan American Exposition on September 6th of 1901, he greeted a line of people. McKinley pulled his famous red carnation from his lapel and gave it to a little girl waiting in line. Seconds after he gave the little girl his red carnation, he was struck by an assassin's bullet and then died several days later. Interesting. I thought that was really cool. Another interesting little fact about carnations regarding McKinley. After William McKinley's assassination, Ohio made McKinley's favorite flower, the scarlet carnation, the official state flower. So the official state flower of Ohio is the scarlet carnation, and it is based upon the fact that that was William McKinley's favorite flower, and he always wore a carnation for good luck. And I thought that was a really cool story, too, about him giving the little girl his red carnation, as he greeted people, and then, within seconds later, he was shot. Thought that was a pretty cool story. Okay, so now I think... Oh, one other thing I do want to mention. Mount McKinley. So, Mount McKinley is in Denali National Park in Alaska. It is the tallest mountain in the United States. It was named Mount McKinley, years ago. I'm going to read to you when it was named Mount McKinley. And then they changed the name of it. And I'm pretty sure it's Denali now. It's considered Mount Denali or just Denali. It's no longer Mount McKinley, but for years, if you were an outdoor enthusiast, especially anybody that was a mountaineering type person that, wanted to summit mountains, Mount McKinley was the crown jewel here in the United States. It was the tallest, still is the tallest But I'm going to read you something interesting about Mount McKinley. Mount McKinley lost more than 80 feet in 2013, and then it lost its name. McKinley never set foot in Alaska. William McKinley, he never set foot in Alaska, and he never saw the peak named for him by prospector William Dickey, a designation that was made official by President Woodrow Wilson in 1917. But that's probably a good thing, because it's been a rough few years for McKinley's spot on the mountain. First, the mountain shrank. On September 12th of 2013, Alaska Lieutenant Governor Meade Treadwell announced that North America's highest peak, Mount McKinley, was 20,237 feet tall, 83 feet shorter than previously thought. The U.S. Geological Survey and Alaska's statewide digital mapping initiative used new radar technology to correct the earlier height of 12,320 feet, which had been recorded in 1952 using photogrammetry? Yeah, photogrammetry? Photogrammetry. I don't even know what that means. Obviously, not highly technologically advanced, though, since it was used in 1952. Excuse me. Then the mountain cut its ties to McKinley. Although the Alaska Board of Geographic Names changed the name of the mountain in 1975 to Denali, a name used by the Koyukon Athabascan people, for decades, Ohio representatives had been blocking name change requests sent by the Alaskan state legislature to the United States Board on Geographic Names. Jimmy Carter signed the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act in 1980 that reverted the name of the area to the Denali National Park and Preserve, but the name of the mountain itself had remained steady until 2015. Associate Director for the National Park Service, Victor Knox, said in June of that year that he had no objection to a January bill submitted by Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski that would rename the peak Denali. The change became official in 2015, stripping the 25th president's name from the highest peak in North America. But you should use a non-permanent marker on those atlases. The Ohio delegation, including Speaker John Bonner and Representative Tim Ryan, were quick to denounce the decision and have said they're exploring legal avenues to challenge the decision. And in late 2017, President Donald Trump considered reversing the decision, though the Alaska Senate told him thanks, but no thanks. So, it was Mount McKinley for many, many, many decades. It's still the tallest in North America, but it is no longer Mount McKinley. It is now Denali. So, pretty interesting stuff, I thought at least. And yes, I know, I definitely need to have my catchphrase be pretty interesting stuff because I say it all the time. So, but I do. I find it really interesting. I find this stuff to be fascinating. I did know that, of course, about Mount McKinley. I am a pretty big outdoor enthusiast. I love to hike, love to camp. I lived in Montana for 5 years. So, actually, for a little fun fact for you, those of you who follow this channel, Henry, my son, he was actually born in Montana. He's raised a Jersey boy because he's been in New Jersey since he was 1 year old. So he's been in New Jersey his whole life, really. But he was born and lived his first year of life in Montana. So he always will hold the distinction of being a Montana-born little lad. So interesting little fun fact for everybody. Okay, cool. Now, we kind of went over the presidency, the Spanish-American War, all that good stuff. Now it's time for us to get into the assassination and the death and the gravesite of William McKinley, the 25th president. So sit back, because this will probably be a good 20 minutes or so of me reading things and really diving into all these different things with William McKinley. So here we go. Okay, let's jump in. I'm going to read some other things before I jump into the president is dead, of course. William McKinley is in a receiving line, shaking hands. A fellow comes up. His hand is wrapped, and inside the wrapping is a handgun. McKinley is shot. He lingers, and then he dies, making Theodore Roosevelt the first president to come into office in the 20th century. The assassin, an anarchist named Leon Czolgosz, believed that by taking out the president, he would make a strike against the power of the wealthy over American society. Inadvertently, he accomplished his mission as his 2 bullets brought a man to the White House who would finally take on the political dominance of big business and forever change the meaning of presidential power. Ironically enough, McKinley, when it came to his assassination, it's kind of interesting. So here we go. During a public reception at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, on September 6th of 1901, Leon Czolgosz shot McKinley twice in the torso while the president greeted guests in a receiving line. McKinley allegedly uttered, "Don't let them hurt him," as the angry mob descended on Czolgosz. Later at the emergency hospital on the exposition grounds, McKinley said of his assassin, "It must have been some poor misguided fellow. And he didn't know, poor fellow, what he was doing. He couldn't have known." An OBGYN performed the emergency surgery that failed to save McKinley's life. Matthew Mann, a physician and professor of gynecology at the University of Buffalo, was chosen by a hastily assembled group of doctors to perform surgery on McKinley. But the team could not find the second bullet inside the president's body. A brand new X-ray machine sent by Thomas Edison arrived in Buffalo but was never used, and it was thought McKinley's condition was improving. Instead, his health declined as gangrene set in around the path of the bullet. And obviously, we know what happened from there on in. Another interesting fact, McKinley showed compassion for his assassin. After Leon Frank Czolgosz shot McKinley, the crowd subdued him and began to beat him severely. The wounded McKinley shouted, "Boys, don't let them hurt him," as I had just mentioned a minute ago. So he definitely was compassionate for whatever reason regarding his assassin. And now we are going to read from, of course, the book, The President is Dead, by Louis Pacone. I read from this very often, pretty much during all of my videos. And we are going to read about McKinley's assassination and the death. So here we go. This is from The President is Dead, by Louis Pacone. In June of 1901, President William McKinley planned a visit to Buffalo, New York for the Pan American Exposition. When his wife Ida became ill, the trip was postponed. 2 months later, McKinley was ready to make the journey. On the evening of Wednesday, September 4th, McKinley arrived in Buffalo and was welcomed by throngs of people at the train station. Intermingled with the crowd of well-wishers and sightseers was Leon Frank Czolgosz, a deranged anarchist. He fancied himself a disciple of the most notorious anarchist of the day, Emma Goldman, and professed that no man should have as much power as the president. Czolgosz believed that killing President McKinley would lead to an end of capitalism and return power to the masses. The day before McKinley's arrival, Czolgosz had visited Wallbridge Hardware on Main Street and purchased a silver-plated .32 caliber Iver Johnson revolver for $4.50. The evening McKinley arrived, he did not get close enough to use it, but he was not easily deterred. That night, McKinley slept at the home of Exposition President John G. Milburn. The next day was President's Day at the exposition, and McKinley gave a speech, the last of his life, and one that many considered his greatest. In it, he said words that would later be memorialized within his tomb. Let us ever remember that our interest is in concord, not in conflict, and that our real eminence rests in the victories of peace, not those of war. Again, Czolgosz lurked in the audience, and for the second time, the opportunity to shoot McKinley did not present itself. McKinley started the next day, September 6th, with an invigorating 20-minute walk along Delaware Avenue. At 9 a.m., he boarded a northbound train to take a tour of one of the country's most popular attractions, Niagara Falls. Czolgosz followed him, but the stalker again decided this was not the time or place and returned to Buffalo. McKinley enjoyed his visit, taking in a pleasant lunch and cigar before the return trip. Back in Buffalo, he went directly to the exposition, arriving around 3:30 p.m. at the massive, ornately decorated Temple of Music concert building. McKinley positioned himself at the end of the room, and at 4 p.m., he began one of his favorite activities, a meet and greet with citizens. People lined up between columns of soldiers who were there to protect the president. As the organist played a Bach sonata, Czolgosz approached McKinley. His hand was wrapped in a handkerchief to conceal his gun. The man in front of Czolgosz approached the president and grasped his hand. When he did not release McKinley's hand when expected, the guards quickly intervened to move him along. Distracted, they did not notice Czolgosz next in line with his handkerchief-wrapped hand. Czolgosz fired 2 shots at close range. The first shot was superficial and ricocheted off McKinley's breastplate, but the second lead bullet pierced his stomach about 5.5 inches below his left nipple. The music came to a sudden halt. The president slumped, and Czolgosz's handkerchief was in flames. It was 4:07 p.m. James Parker, a 6'4" African-American man in line behind Czolgosz, sprang into action. He hit Czolgosz in the neck with one hand and grabbed the gun with the other, stopping him from getting off a third shot. A newspaper in Utica proclaimed that Parker pounced upon the criminal with the fury of an enraged tiger. His heroic response provided the opening the guards needed to step in and take control. They attacked Czolgosz and beat him to a pulp. Panic erupted in the hall as people rushed toward the exit, but McKinley's first reaction was confusion. He kept his composure, but when he saw a blood stain on his shirt spreading quickly, he began to comprehend what had happened. He asked his guards, "Am I shot?" Unsure of himself, a guard unbuttoned the president's shirt and confirmed his worst suspicions. "I'm afraid that you are, Mr. President." As the president lay on the ground, he commanded his men, who were still pummeling Czolgosz, in a soft voice, "Go easy on him, boys." Struggling into a chair, he continued compassionately, "Let no one hurt him." His next concern was his fragile wife, Ida. He told his personal secretary, George Bruce Cortelyou, "My wife, be careful, Cortelyou. How you tell her, oh, be careful." McKinley was carried to an ambulance and taken to the hospital on the exposition grounds, arriving 18 minutes after the shots were fired. However, the hospital was ill-prepared. The only staff on hand were interns and nurses on a 1-month assignment, more accustomed to treating the occasional heat stroke or stomach ache rather than a gunshot wound. 20 minutes later, surgeon Herman Minter arrived. McKinley had met him the day before, but now under dramatically different circumstances, he looked at Minter and said, "Doctor, when I met you yesterday, I did not imagine that today I should have asked a favor of you." McKinley was given an injection of morphine and strychnine? Don't know what that is. And Minter determined an immediate operation was required. Several minutes later, Dr. Matthew D. Mann arrived, who, despite being a gynecologist and obstetrician, was still deemed the most qualified to perform the surgery. The best surgeon in the area to perform a gunshot operation was Roswell Park, but he was in Niagara Falls performing another operation. At 5:20 p.m., McKinley was administered ether to render him unconscious. As the drug took effect, McKinley recited the Lord's Prayer and drifted into a deep sleep. Mann began the operation despite lack of proper surgical equipment and adequate lighting, while McKinley's personal physician, Presley Rixey, positioned a mirror to reflect sunlight onto the operating table to allow Mann to see what he was doing. However, the greatest difficulty was the great size of President McKinley's abdomen and the amount of fat present. Mann poked around McKinley's wounds for the bullet. He did not find it, but he did discover a hole in the president's stomach, which he sewed up with black silk stitches. More damaging than the bullet that remained in his body was Mann's decision not to drain the wound. This would later lead to gangrene that eventually killed the president. Just as Mann was completing the operation, Park arrived, but his expertise proved too late. After the surgery, an unconscious McKinley was taken back to the Milburn house at approximately 6:30 p.m. Silent onlookers lined the route as the carriage passed. The home was instantly transformed into both a hospital and the presidential headquarters. The surrounding blocks were roped off, and the 14th U.S. Army Regiment stood guard. The first floor became the makeshift reception area, while McKinley convalesced in a quiet back room on the second floor with a large marble fireplace. There, beneath a picture of George Washington, he could peacefully gaze out the side windows. Some visitors and well-wishers were permitted to see the president, and thousands of telegrams flooded the home. Doctors provided reports of the president's condition from the front porch to reporters who had set up camp in white tents staked in the front yard. The reporters published updates of the president's temperature, sleep, and eating habits nearly every hour. Over the next week, McKinley drifted in and out of consciousness as morphine eased his pain. With each passing day, Americans became more convinced that their burly president would survive the ordeal. To help locate the bullet, Thomas Edison sent a primitive X-ray machine to the home. It arrived on September 9th, but proved as useless as the metal detector used on James Garfield 20 years earlier. Doctors had McKinley on a liquid diet, but by September 12th, he felt good enough for solid food and had a breakfast of chicken broth, toast, and coffee. The doctors were pleased with his progress, but declined his request for a cigar. Soon after his meal, McKinley felt sick, but his doctors were not alarmed and attributed it to indigestion. Even after his pulse jumped to 128, the doctors reasoned that McKinley would be back on track once the food passed through his system. That night, after a much-anticipated bowel movement, McKinley's pulse dropped to 120, and the doctors were almost ready to declare the spell had passed. Their elation was short-lived when his pulse did not decrease any further and his temperature rose to 100.2. By the next morning, the 8:30 a.m. report was again optimistic. The president responded to medical treatment and is better. The doctors administered calomel, and oil, and they proved effective. He is resting nicely now, and the feeling is better. But the president was not feeling better. McKinley's stomach was infected with gangrene, and the solid meal would be fatal. On Friday, September 13th, he drifted in and out of consciousness. In the morning, he stirred and gazed out the window. It was an overcast day, and McKinley weakly commented, "It is not so bright as it was yesterday." Looking at the leaves on the trees, he added, "It is pleasant to see them." By the evening, he only could open his eyes sporadically. Doctors administered powerful heart stimulants, including oxygen, to pull him back to consciousness. He weakly whispered to Dr. Rixey for his wife. Kneeling by his side, Ida clasped her husband's hands while he repeated the hymn, "Nearer, my God, to thee." Fully aware his fate was now in God's hands, McKinley whispered his final words, "Goodbye, all. Goodbye. It is God's way. His will be done." Dr. Mann hurriedly wrote the words down to keep for the ages. McKinley lost consciousness for the last time at 7:50 p.m. Doctors desperately administered oxygen until 8:30 p.m. and then permitted nature to run its course. Within 90 minutes, his skin was cold and pulse barely perceptible. The press was told death was imminent, but McKinley lingered on. Early the next morning, Dr. Rixey felt for a pulse but could find none. At 2:16 a.m. on September 14th of 1901, William McKinley was pronounced dead. With him were his family, his wife Ida, brother Abner, sisters Helen and Sarah, nieces Mary and Sarah, cousin F.M. Osborne, and nephews James, William, and John, along with Courtlew, Comptroller of the Currency Charles G. Dawes, Rutherford B. Hayes' son, Colonel Webb C. Hayes, Colonel William C. Brown, several nurses, and Marine hospital attendants. An autopsy was performed. The cause of death, as documented on his death certificate, was gangrene of both walls of the stomach and pancreas following gunshot wounds. After a 4-hour search, the coroner could still not locate the bullet. The autopsy also exonerated the physicians in a debatable addendum. Death was unavoidable by any surgical or medical treatment and was the direct result of the bullet wound. McKinley's cabinet immediately began to plan his funeral to include services in Buffalo, Washington, D.C., and a September 19th burial in Canton, Ohio. Theodore Roosevelt, now thrust into the presidency, issued his first official proclamation in which he declared, "I, Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States of America, do appoint Thursday, next September 19th, a day in which the body of the dead president will be laid in its last earthly resting place as a day of mourning and prayer throughout the United States. I earnestly recommend all the people to assemble on that day in their respective places of divine worship, there to bow down in submission to the will of Almighty God, and to pay out of full hearts the homage of love and reverence to the memory of the great and good president, whose death has so sorely smitten the nation." McKinley's body was placed in an open casket in the drawing room. It was draped in black, and at the foot was a new silk American flag. A silver plate bore the simple inscription, "William McKinley, born January 29th of 1843, died September 14th of 1901. The next day at 11 a.m., a service was held at the Milburn House for family and invited friends, including President Roosevelt. And then, of course, funeral was held, processions were held, and I'm going to read you a bit about each site as I show you some pictures here. The assassination site. The site where William McKinley was shot is commemorated by a historic marker located on the median of a suburban Fordham Drive on the suburban Fordham Drive between Elmwood Avenue and Lincoln Parkway. The bronze plaque on a granite boulder reads, "In the Pan American Temple of Music, which covered the spot President McKinley was fatally shot September 4th of 1901, this marker placed by the Buffalo Historical Society." The marker was unveiled on June 28th of 1921. There was a small crowd, a little, little ceremony. We have not attempted to fix the exact point in the Temple of Music where the president stood when shot. The marker has been set here because in this strip of parking, it is readily seen without obstructing the street, without infringing on any private property. So yes, this is, you're seeing on your screen, when I visited Buffalo, this is the site of where the Pan American Temple of Music building stood. This is, right in general proximity of where McKinley was shot there in Buffalo, New York. So that is the pictures you've been seeing on your screen now. And then, of course, the location of his death. The home where the president died, located at 1168 Delaware Avenue, was built in 1861 for George C. Vaughan. Over the next 27 years, it changed hands frequently, having 5 more owners through 1888. In 1888, the home was purchased by a prominent lawyer, John G. Milburn. After being chosen as president of the Pan American Exposition Company, Milburn remodeled his home in anticipation of hosting dignitaries. When he learned of McKinley's visit, he extended an offer for the president and his wife to stay with him. They slept upstairs in a spacious 18 by 20 foot bedroom on the north side of the home. After the president's death, tourists and locals alike would flock to see the historic home. Some would pick up a leaf, a twig, or blades of grass as a souvenir, while other relic hunters knocked off chips from their steps. The Milburn sold the home in 1904 to Philip M. Shannon, and on January 10th of 1907, a fire broke out in the home. While the building was not completely lost, the room where McKinley died was heavily damaged. In November of 1919, locals lamented that the McKinley death chamber will soon disappear, after Shannon converted the historic home into apartments. Shannon hired George W. Butler to do the construction and was committed to preserving the wood from the historic home. He also warned that once completed, the death chamber would be unrecognizable. In 1928, the apartment building was purchased by Conrad Wetlaufer, who expanded its capacity to 8 units. So interestingly enough, the Milburn home came to an end. The historic home was torn down in 1957, and today the site where the home once stood is dubbed Parking Lot 4. At the location is an undated roadside marker that reads, "Site of the Milburn House. Here died William McKinley, September 14th of 1901. So that's the pictures you've been seeing are the original Milburn House, that I found online. And then, of course, pictures of me in front of the sign where the Milburn House once stood. And that is where President McKinley died. And then the receiving vault. The Wirtz Receiving Vault is in Canton's West Lawn Cemetery, adjacent to the McKinley National Memorial, to the left of the entrance. It was erected in 1893 after the Board of Canton Cemetery Association voted to build a temporary receiving vault to use during winter months when freezing temperatures made the grounds too difficult to dig. The cost for construction was covered by Mrs. Frank W. Wirtz in exchange for a plaque on the vault for her late husband. It can be seen atop the iron gate. Today, there is an undated, informative display in front of the vault. So, this is where McKinley was originally buried, was in this receiving vault in the West Lawn Cemetery in Canton, Ohio. Pretty interesting stuff, pretty cool stuff. He also had a home, of course, in Canton, Ohio, that, is still preserved to this day. I did not visit there. But stay tuned. There is a possibility I will be. There was a funeral in Canton, Ohio. A lot of it took place at the First Methodist Church in Canton. So there was a funeral for the president in Canton. And then, of course, the tomb. After its completion, the McKinley National Memorial Association continued to maintain the site, but over time it became a financial burden. They tried unsuccessfully to turn it over to the National Park Service in 1939. Failing, they continued to look for a suitor until finally, on October 23rd of 1943, the site was transferred to the Ohio State Archaeological and Historical Society, today known as the Ohio Historical Society. The tiered reflecting pools have not stood the test of time, as the water that was intended to flow instead turned into stagnant and fetid. In September of 1920, it was the first to propose filling them in. 30 years later, in 1951, this was finally done, and today there is a grassy divider between the entrance and exit roads. Several significant events happened over the following decades. On September 16th of 1951, a rededication ceremony was held. In 1973, management of the site was transferred to the Stark County Historical Society. The following year, the original skylight design was installed. And then on September 26th of 1992, another rededication ceremony was held. Today, while the monument is second to the Football Hall of Fame for most Canton tourists, it is still visited by 200,000 people each year and is popular with joggers. The tomb is located at 800 McKinley Monument Drive, Northwest in Canton, Ohio. It is a really magnificent tomb. As you see from the pictures here, I did visit there last year in 2020. It was closed when I visited. I could not see the inside where the sarcophagus is. But it is these steps. There must be about 50 steps leading up to this tomb. So it is popular with joggers who take their morning jogs and walks and get their stair exercise up and down these steps. It's almost like a scene out of Rocky, running up the steps and such, if anybody's familiar with Rocky. Really cool tomb. Really cool memorial. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you where he was originally buried, of course, the receiving vault, and then, of course, where he's buried now, the McKinley Memorial Tomb. So there you have it. What's up, guys? How's everybody doing? I am here at the William McKinley Memorial. I'm actually going to flip you guys around. Here we are. This is in Canton, Ohio. I am going to record once I'm inside, but monument of McKinley. Good stuff. Alright, I'll record more once I get inside. Hey guys, how's it going? TJ here. Sorry about the sun glare. So here I am, President William McKinley. Flip you guys around here. So there you go. We are inside the McKinley tomb. There's the doorway. Leads outside. There's the statue of McKinley there. And here we go. It's 25th President of the United States, William McKinley. Beautiful, beautiful tomb and memorial in here. And his wife Ida, First Lady. Beautiful it is. It really is something. This is not my first time ever being here to the memorial, but it's my first time ever being inside. I've never seen the sarcophagus here, and it was closed last year when I was here for 2020 for COVID, but I figured it would be a really cool thing to bring you guys in here, since this week is the McKinley installment of our presidential series, so pretty cool stuff. Good stuff. So here you go. Inside the William McKinley Memorial, the tomb of the 25th President, William McKinley. Thanks, guys. Just one last quick look at the McKinley Memorial. Look at that, it's so beautiful. I mean, it's just really a beautiful, beautiful building. Awesome stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed this look, because this has definitely been a treat for me. We're also going to take a look at the original holding vault of McKinley's. I believe it's the West Lawn Cemetery right here in Canton. I think that's what it's called. We're going to go to that next, and then I'll go see his house too, and then I'll make the journey back to New Jersey. I started driving at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I got here about 9:30 in the morning, so about a 7.5 hour drive, but well worth it to take a look at our 25th president and his wife's final resting place. Hope you enjoyed this, guys. Thanks so much. Hey guys, TJ here with Dead History, and I am actually at the West Lawn Cemetery in Canton, Ohio. I'm going to flip you guys around in a second, because what I'm here is behind me, right there, is the receiving vault here at West Lawn Cemetery. I'm going to flip you guys around and explain. Okay, so there's the receiving vault here at West Lawn Cemetery. So if you look, see my finger, like back, right back like over there. no joke, maybe 200 yards, maybe 300 yards, 200 to 300 yards away, like right back over there, is the McKinley tomb, the McKinley Memorial that I showed you guys. This here at West Lawn Cemetery in Canton, Ohio, this is where President William McKinley was laid to rest for 6 years. After his death, he was brought here. This is where the original funeral and burial was. See, Wirtz Receiving Vault. Tells you all about it there. Anybody wants to pause the video and take a read, go ahead. I'm not going to read all that, but it even says the Wirtz Receiving Vault was used as a resting place for William McKinley from September 19th of 1901 until the McKinley National Memorial was completed in 1907. During those 6 years, the receiving vault was protected by an honor guard of Federal Army sentries. Ida McKinley visited the Wirtz site daily until her death in May of 1907. So, that's pretty awesome. The fact that William McKinley was here. There was an armed honor guard here that used to protect it. Sorry about the sirens in the background. As you see, this vault served as the temporary resting place until 1907 for the body of William McKinley, our 25th President of the United States. So, pretty cool stuff. Look at this. Look at these doors. Look at that, huh? Iron doors. Unfortunately, I can't get in and see anything else, but that is so cool. Look at this place, huh? Very cool. So, there you go, the Wirtz Receiving Vault here at West Lawn Cemetery in Canton, Ohio. And this is where the body of our 25th President of the United States, William McKinley, laid to rest for 6 years until his memorial, like I said, which is only right back over that direction, was completed 6 years later. But there you go. Hope you guys enjoyed this. This is a pretty cool little, here, I'll show you the back end of this. Obviously, as you can see, cool thing about these vaults and tombs, like, look, it's built right into the side of a hill, right in. So I'll kind of walk up a little bit back here, but look at that. It's pretty cool, huh? Show you guys the back side of this. Looks like we got a groundhog or gopher here. But look at that. Here's the back side of the Wirtz Receiving Vault, where President William McKinley, his body laid to rest for 6 years before his tomb was completed. Pretty cool stuff. So, it's pretty steep here. Watch, I'm going to probably fall and break my neck, but pretty cool stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed this look, kind of a unique look at history. So, there you go. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, so one last thing I want to show you guys here while I'm in Canton. Right there behind me is I'm going to turn you guys around here. It's actually the Saxton McKinley house. So this is the home of Ida and William McKinley. This was Ida Saxton's house, William McKinley's wife. And then they did live here for a period of time. Very beautiful, beautiful, beautiful old home. It's very nice. Let me see if I can actually get a better view of it from back here. There we go. That's even nicer. So there you go, the Saxton McKinley home in Canton, Ohio. Beautiful, beautiful old home. And there it is. Just wanted to show you guys. So that's pretty much it. That is the life, the legacy, and the assassination and death of our 25th President of the United States, William McKinley. I hope you enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. I always enjoy when we get to dive into something really, really historic, such as an assassination. Another thing that I do want to show you guys, special bonus, stay tuned here in another minute. I am going to show you where Leon Czolgosz's gravesite is. Leon Czolgosz is actually buried with several inmates in a mass grave. It is marked Fort Hill Remains, but that is where Leon Czolgosz's body is actually buried. I will put on the screen the exact cemetery and location so you can see, and you'll see my pictures of when I visited there. But this is the gravesite of Leon Czolgosz. So pretty interesting stuff. So you're going to see a lot of stuff here. You're going to see, of course, the tomb of McKinley. You're going to see the home of McKinley, the original receiving vault where McKinley was held for several years, and the gravesite of the assassin, Leon Czolgosz. So pretty interesting stuff. Czolgosz was arrested, of course, as everybody should know. He was arrested immediately. He was grabbed when he shot McKinley. He did stand trial. A grand jury indicted Czolgosz on September 16th of that year with one count of first-degree murder. Throughout his incarceration, Czolgosz spoke freely with his guards, but he refused every interaction with Robert C. Titus and Loran L. Lewis, the prominent judges turned attorneys assigned to defend him. He would not speak to them, and with the expert psychiatrist sent to test his sanity. It was prosecuted. Czolgosz's trial began in the state courthouse in Buffalo on September 23rd of 1901, 9 days after William McKinley actually died. And long story short, he was found guilty. And he was found guilty. Let me see here, just to give you an idea of what happened. He was obviously going to be sent to death, of course. To various eyewitnesses to the shooting, his co-counsel was refusal. 20 minutes, 7 minutes. Lewis took pains to praise McKinley. Notes. Even had the jury believed the defense that Czolgosz was insane by claiming that no sane man would have shot and killed the president in such a public and blatant manner, knowing he would be caught, there was still the legal definition of insanity to be overcome. Under New York law, Czolgosz was legally insane only if he was unable to understand what he was doing. The jury was unconvinced of Czolgosz's insanity due to the directions given to them by Judge White. They voted to convict him after less than a half hour of deliberations. A jury member later said that it would have been sooner, but they wanted to review the evidence before conviction. Czolgosz had 2 visits the night before his execution, one with 2 clergymen and another later in the night with his brother and brother-in-law. He was put to death, of course. Czolgosz's last words were, "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the good working people. I am not sorry for my crime. I am sorry I could not see my father." Czolgosz was electrocuted by 3 jolts on October 29th of 1901, 45 days after William McKinley died. Czolgosz was pronounced dead at 7:14 a.m. So, there you go. And then, of course, he, as I said, is buried at the, it's called the Soul Cemetery in Cuyahoga County, New York. And I'm going to show you that as well. So, there you have it, guys. Life, legacy, presidency, assassination, and all the things that come with and entail about the assassination. So I hope you enjoyed this look at our 25th president, William McKinley. Stay tuned for next week as we're going to take a look at our 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt, a big one. Henry will be back, and he will be helping me. He's excited about this one. So stay tuned for next week. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for everything, the likes, the comments, the questions, all of it. Thanks so much. Couldn't do this without you guys. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye, guys.